Okay.
Hard.
Welcome.
The start bit's hardest.
Welcome to the Salt Index Football Podcast, a podcast where we look at some of football's biggest questions through the lens of data analysis. Coming from a background in tech and statistics, we conduct the analysis ourselves and create our own unique way of indexing data, which we call a Salt Index. If it doesn't make sense to you yet, that's okay. Continue listening and it will become clear as we go on. My name is Sunny, and now would be a good time to bring in our co-host, Adam.
Hello. Lovely to be here once again for the first podcast.
So what are we talking about today?
So, today we're going to first look at transfers. It's a transfer window, so we thought we'd do something on transfers. So we'll get onto what we looked at later, but I think it's a good time to look at what's happening in the transfer window at the moment. I think we're going to start with our top threes as far as who we think is the best three transfers so far. I've kept to the Premiership. Have you done the same, or?
Yeah, I have. And I guess these aren't necessarily the ones that I'm most excited about, but three that I think are exciting for the team that they've come into, at least.
Yeah, I've kind of left out some of the bigger transfers just in the fact that you kind of know they're going to do quite well. Like Bale, for example, probably going to do well when he's actually fit.
Yeah.
If he's ever actually fit. But yeah, so he's out. Do you want to go first, or should I go first?
Well, I thought because you posed the question to me, which I thought was interesting, and I thought maybe we could do one at a time, and then as we do it, we may end up seeing that we've got some overlap. In which case, we can kind of just say, yeah, I've got them as well. So yeah, do you want to go with your first pick?
Oh, so my first one. There's been quite a few good signings for this team. So you've had Alan, you've had James Rodriguez. So obviously, I'm giving away it's Everton. But I think it's my favourite signing of this season so far, just because I've always rated him. It's Abdoulaye Doucouré.
Okay, cool.
So, obviously in a struggling team last year, and has been since he joined the league. But as far as a box-to-box midfielder that can defend, can attack, is just solid. I think a lot of their players are going to do a lot better just from the fact that they've got that decent centre midfielder that can do everything. And I think a lot of people will be able to play off him because obviously a lot of obviously Alan's a bit more defensive, so he'll help. So those two together is going to be massive. But yeah, I think he's going to have another good season. I think now he's playing in a better team. Obviously quite a new team, but there's still quite a few players in there that have been together for quite a long time. So the defense is obviously quite set now. So I think, annoyingly, I think Everton are going to do quite well this year.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's my first pick.
Yeah, that's a good shout as well. I mean, how much did he come for? Like 25 mil?
I think it was 20. I think it was about 20. Yeah, I should know that. I probably should have researched that. But yeah, I think it was about 20 as well.
Okay, yeah, no, it's a good signing. I guess the first one I'll cover then, I mean, given that we're already talking about Everton, and this one is probably a little bit more obvious, but I've picked James Rodriguez for one. And the reason why I picked him was because it seems like the teams he's been in before, or at least with Bayern Munich and Monaco, he played more as he is kind of like a number 10, and didn't necessarily fit into the systems that were there, or at least the systems employed by managers after Ancelotti had left. So kind of like Zidane and any of the 2 or 3 managers that Bayern had. And it seemed like he was just such a good player and had so much quality, but was just always in the wrong team. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of when Coutinho went to Barcelona, and he didn't necessarily fit the system, but he had loads of quality. And I think he's just an exciting acquisition for Everton because as long as they play him in the right system, I think he'll just add loads of quality to that team, and is kind of definitely an upgrade on the likes of, say, Sigurdsson, who is still a pretty good player anyway. So yeah, he was my first pick. So yeah, who was your second?
That's a good.
Sorry, yeah, go on.
I think that's a good analogy in the fact that the Coutinho one, in the fact that they both went to teams that had really good wingers, like world class, some of the best players in the world. So if you're trying to play a striker and a winger and then trying to throw a number 10 in there, like, you're going to be on the bench half the time. So I agree. I'd have disagreed with you as well until I'd seen how he started the season as well, because I've always thought he was a bit overhyped because of that one World Cup. but since he's started, he's absolutely smashing it in it. So yeah, good choice, I think. So a lot of my choices. So I've got a big signing to finish with, but my next one is Callum Wilson. I think he struggled late, to be fair, in a really bad Bournemouth side that was really struggling for attack. He only got 9 goals, I think, last season, whereas I think he was a top English scorer the year before with 15. I just think in a decent attacking side, he'll do well, and I think. Not that I'm saying Newcastle will be this year, potentially, but I think it's the first time they've had a striker you can trust for a while as well. And I think playing with Andy Carroll might do him some good in the fact you get a few knock. He seems like the kind of guy that if you get stuff knocked down to him in the box, he's going to score. So yeah, a bit of a 20 million as well. I think that's below the going rate for a proven Premiership goal scorer. So yeah, I think Callum Wilson, as much as I don't want Newcastle to do very well as well, I know we're trying to keep personal opinion away, but yeah,
No.
I hope that doesn't come good.
But no, that's fair. I mean, I don't know many people that like Newcastle either, but I don't live north, so. But no, that's a good shout. Wilson was
another team not listening. Perfect.
Well, yeah, Wilson was someone I was considering putting on mine as well, because I think he is a good, like for 20 mil, that's a pretty good risk to take. Like you said, he is a proven goal scorer as well, and hopefully he's kind of with players of slightly better quality than he had at Bournemouth. So my second pick was Lallana to Brighton. And I mean, obviously he came on a free, but I feel like as long as he can stay fit, he comes in and immediately becomes Brighton's best midfielder. And you know, on the same token, one of the best players in the team. I think he will just improve the quality of everyone around him. And again, you know, I mean, a lot of it hinges on whether he can stay fit, but I feel like he could add enough quality in and around the team, so even in kind of training sessions and things like that. And it might be the difference between them getting relegated or staying up. But again, you know, I mean, we've seen how his career's panned out over the past 2 or 3 years. He's one of those players who's almost always on the treatment table. Maybe gets a handful of games spread out across the season. So it's a case of whether he can stay fit.
Yeah, I think that was the only thing that made me not consider him, because I think for free, yeah, that's ridiculous. They've been lucky in the fact that Liverpool were never going to sell him, just in the fact that his contract was too big. So they managed to let it run out. Yeah, I think the only issue is going to be if he stays fit. But I think he changed the game a bit last year in the fact that he has lost a bit of pace and he was struggling to get into the Liverpool side. So he's playing deeper. I think he had some cracking games last season as well. There just wasn't many of them, either obviously being second choice or on the treatment table, as you say. So yeah, he's either a good signing for them or a good signing for their injury staff. They'll have something to do for the rest of the season.
Yeah, he's keeping someone busy. If it's not the opposition, it's his physios. So who was your third pick?
Exactly. Cool. So this is one of the most expensive transfers, but I'm talking about this guy's. I think he's going to be one of the best players in the world in a few years' time, and that's Kai Havertz at Chelsea. Obviously, they've spent a hell of a lot of money this summer. Obviously, they've had a few transfer periods where they couldn't really buy anyone, and I think, yeah, he's got everything. He's tall. He's 21. He'll turn up. He's almost like a Lampard. He'll turn up, score goals. Technique-wise, not many better. Box to box, fit. Seems to have a good attitude. Hasn't looked amazing yet for Chelsea, but there's definitely signs. I think that 70 million is a lot of money to spend on a player, but yeah, I think they've potentially bought one of the future all-stars in the world, I think. And yeah, another world-class German box-to-box midfielder. They seem to roll with one world-class one out at least every 5 years, don't they? So yeah, that's my one. I was looking at Ziyech and a few of the other signings they've made potentially as being my third choice, but I think Kai Havertz is a stunning signing.
Yeah, no, that's fair. He gets a lot of comparisons to Michael Ballack, rightly or wrongly, I guess, because he's come through at Leverkusen. I mean, have you seen or noticed any kind of similarities in his game from what you've seen so far?
Yeah, they're both quite for quite a skillful player, as Havertz is. He's still quite no nonsense box to box midfielder, as in he seems to have a good football brain on him, and he seems to, I'd say Michael Ballack had more of that kind of um, general like crushing people as well as being a good attacking midfielder. But yeah, it's similar just in the quality. You can tell that they're both. Well, obviously Michael Ballack was a quality player, so yeah, yeah, slightly. I think, but he's got better technique than even Michael Ballack. We'll see what his shooting's like in the over this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think of my three players, if we kind of look again at this in 3 months' time, I think I wouldn't be surprised if off my three choices, he was the one that people are singing the most about.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I didn't catch too much of the Crystal Palace Chelsea game that finished a moment ago, but Joe Cole was creaming in his pants when he was talking about not Ballack, Havertz earlier on. So yeah,
Alex on the brain there.
Ballack's on the brain. Yeah, so it might be that both of you guys are validated in your opinions in months to come, and I don't think many people would be surprised if that's the case. So the third and final pick I had, probably a little bit less, well, definitely less glamorous, I guess, than Havertz. But my third one was Willian to Arsenal. And did they pay 8 mil for him, or did he come on was he signed for free?
I think it was a free. Yeah, I think it was a free transfer.
Well, then even more so. I mean, if it was free, I couldn't remember whether they just gave like a token gesture of like 7 or 8 mil. But if it was free, even better. I just think he's still good enough to play regularly for a top team. And whether this is completely true, but I feel like he was pushed out of Chelsea a little bit in terms of getting into the squad, just because even though he's kind of like a Brazilian winger of sorts, he's not necessarily that as much of a flair player as the likes of some of the people that they've had over the past 10 or 15 years. If you think of kind of like Robin or Hazard. But yeah, I just, like I said, I think he's still good enough to play for a top team. And I think he will add some much needed quality to that Arsenal front line, because, if you take Aubameyang out of it, then they've kind of just got 2 or 3 pretty young forwards. I guess they've got Lacazette as well. But yeah, I think he would just add something to that team that they need.
He was nearly my pick as well. Yeah, it's interesting knowing the fact that they've got quite a lot of young wingers, as you say. So he'll bring a bit of experience there. The question is, like, is it going to hinder people like Saka, Nielsen, Pepe's careers? But yeah, I've always thought it was crazy that, like, quite often Chelsea was starting Pedro ahead of him, and I don't think they're even in the same ballpark. Like, there's not many people on the edge of the box as well with a bullet like Willian. He's got ridiculous technique when it comes to shooting. So yeah, just underplayed over the last 3 years. So you're never going to really show your complete talent if you're playing 10, 15 games a season, I think. So yeah, the question is it worth it to kind of put some of these youngsters on the back burner a bit that I think have done quite well. But yeah, experience, and I think you can play them on either wing as well, which might hopefully, I still don't understand. Hopefully an Arsenal fan can explain to me why they're playing Aubameyang on the wing, because I still think it's probably one of the best finishers in the world still. Like, I'd just rather have him in the middle, especially now you can play Pepe, Willian, you can play Saka, there's loads of options they've got. I don't understand why they're playing Aubameyang on a wing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I can only imagine it's some mechanism with which to keep Lacazette in the starting lineup. But I would feel that Aubameyang would do a better job through the middle, and you could just play someone else on the wings and kind of just keep Lacazette on the bench. But he seems to have some pull in that team anyway, or just sell him, or just sell him. So yeah, I mean, okay, so we've got our top 3, and I guess what we'll do is kind of see how they're progressing throughout as the season goes on. And of course, the transfer deadline is in the next few days. So it could be that there are some other big transfers. Monday, right? Okay. So yeah, there could be some big transfers that come through over the next few days. But yeah, I mean that's always typically what happens, and you know you do tend to get some pretty big transfer fees that get thrown around as well during this period of time, which kind of leads us nicely into what the episode is about, which was record transfer fees. Now you've been kind of really tackling this in terms of the analysis. So maybe you could spend a bit of time telling us what you've been doing, basically.
Cool. So yeah, so our idea was, I guess, is a bit of a proof of concept thing for us of let's try and get a data set and see how we can index it. So yeah, as we call the salt index, the idea is right, which of these players is worth their salt. So whoever wins it, you would say right, they're the best in this situation. So yeah, the first thing we've looked at is record transfers. So we're only looking at, and we're starting in 1960. Which I'll probably explain later why. But we started in 1960, and we're looking at every time it was broken. So we're not looking at the top 10 record transfer because they'd obviously all be quite recent. We're looking at every time it was beaten. So for example, 1961, a player called Luis Suarez, who played for Barcelona, went to Inter Milan for £152,000, which was the record for that time. So that's what we've looked at. So yeah, the challenge we had really was how do you rank players over different decades, potentially playing in different positions in different leagues, for different competitions with different awards you can win. How do you get those players together? That's the main challenge. So yeah, so what we did is we started just looking at right, what data can you get for these players? It gets harder the older you go back. So for example, trying to find out 1960s how many goals people got in cup games, or whether they played and stuff. It's probably out there, but I imagine you, like for example, Angelo Sormani, you'd probably have to go to some library in Milan or something and have a look through all the old books and be like, oh, that's when he played. So yeah, that was the main challenge is, right, what data can we get that ties them all together that's fair? So yeah, so that's what we've tried to do. Yeah, so what we've decided was we'll go with some things that the players is completely the responsibility of the players. So I guess so, kind of how many goals they played, how many goals they played, how many goals they got, how many games they played, and then we've also added kind of titles and things as well to try and what all we've literally done with this is we've said, right, if you won the most titles, league titles, you're ranked one, and then we've built an index based on their ordering in each of these things. So yeah, and it's quite an interesting first one to do, and hopefully it kind of explains some of the good ways you can look at this, but also some of the challenges you have when you're trying to pull data like this as well.
Right.
So what do you want to talk about? Should we talk about who won it?
Well, okay. So you're looking at the past 60 years of record transfers, and you've
Correct.
created an analysis or an index for this. So, okay, yeah. So, well, before you say who won, who did you have a prediction for who you thought might win?
Good. That's a good point, actually. Well, more to the point, I think I said, right, if I looked at this list of players, who do I think is the best player in there? Which isn't always helpful because the question we're asking is who was the best signing for that team, essentially, is the actual question we're answering. So there's players in this list that had a great career, got sold to this team, didn't do well there, and then the rest of their career was good as well. So so it's not always a great question to ask who's the best player in this list, but yeah, I would say that the player I thought was the best player, which I'm dying to say, on the list, won it. So it's always good when you produce something and it makes some sense. There are some weird anomalies in it which we can look at, but yeah, it's nice to see that the player I think is the best player on this list, and probably the best player on most lists you'll see, won it.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. And who was that person?
that player was Emil Heskey in 1997 when he went from Leicester to, no, it was Cristiano Ronaldo. It's
Okay.
always going to be Cristiano Ronaldo.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that
Yeah.
seems fair. So,
Um,
so what made him come out first?
so I think let's go through the different metrics. It'd be a good time to just kind of go through them a bit clearer, and then I could what he got and where he came on that list. So, first thing we looked at was games. So how many games they played for that team. Obviously, he played. I think he might be one of the longest standing players on this list, as in he stayed at that team for the longest. Which I was surprised by, because I assumed, for example, I didn't realize Johan Cruyff didn't stay at Barca that long. There's a few surprises on there, but yeah, he played, how many games did he end up playing? He played 292 games for Real Madrid, which puts him second on the list
Oh
behind
yeah.
Alan Shearer.
Okay. Yeah.
So Alan Shearer's not a surprise there.
Right. And just so our listeners are aware as well, you were looking at league appearances.
Yeah.
For this, yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that, as I said earlier, one of the issues was if you start trying to work out what games to count, what games not to count, it becomes a faff. And also, if you type a person's name in and go on Wikipedia, it also just tells you it by league games they've played, which makes collecting it a lot easier. Because yeah, this was quite a manual job. Normally, if I'm collecting data at work, if I'm doing any analysis at work, it's very unlikely I need to do this much manual intervention. It was very clicky, going around places. So yeah, he played 292 games, so second on that. I think the thing that pulls him up and isn't a surprise as well is in those 292 games, he scored 311 goals.
Wow.
Which is obviously, there's no other player that's close to that. So we actually, rather than just going goals scored, we thought it's not necessarily fair. If someone's played 1 year and they score 30 goals in 35 games, you can't really compare that to someone that's played 300 games and scored that many goals. So we've done it goals per game. So Cristiano scores 1.07 goals per game, which is just, there can't be many footballers that have had that. Well, I can't think of any footballers who've got a similar record to that, other than Pele's made up one that he made up, where he was scoring goals at bedtime. He was scoring goals when he was having a bath. And he ended up with 1,000. Whereas these are legit the league of goals. So yeah, it's first on that. The next thing we looked at was average league position of that team. So when they were playing for that team, how many what was their average position, and his was second, which I was quite surprised by. So he's won the league twice there, which again I was quite surprised he only won twice when he was there. And it's a couple of seconds, couple of thirds when Atletico were doing better. We've then broke down kind of competitions, because we kind of decided that some things are worth more to fans, to the team. So league titles, no matter which league you're in, that's always going to be worth something. So he's got 2 league titles, which points him joint second for league titles. Champions League, obviously, he absolutely smashed in the Champions League. So he's got 4 Champions League trophies, which he's top of. Other trophies, he got 2, which weirdly enough, other European trophies, he got 2, which is a joint record as well. And domestic cups, he only came out he came out second in domestic cups as well. I think they were all the metrics we looked at. So he's first, second, or there or thereabouts in almost every metric. So quite a simple first place. And yeah, for me, easily the best. Well, I'm sure some listeners and viewers might get in touch to say, what about Maradona? What about Fat Ronaldo? I think he's those numbers just don't make sense. You can't get more goals and games for a team.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, yeah, I guess that's one of the things, isn't it? It's one of life's debates, or at least football debates, of who's the best player and things like that, which is why things like this salt index come in handy.
Yeah, and it's really obvious who the best player is, and that's Lionel Messi.
Or Emil Heskey. I mean, depends on who you ask, right? So
one more No, I was about to say he's won more premierships than any of those two, but he hasn't. He's played more Premier League games than both Ronaldo and Messi combined, so
Yeah.
he's got to be up there.
Well, he's tied for Premier League trophies with Messi, isn't he?
You can't say more than that, can you?
I think Ronaldo pips him by maybe one or two, but oh well.
They
So
both have. They both have. Sorry, they both have stuff that is just incredible. As in, my favourite stat for Messi is he got 73 goals in a season, which is just impossible. And then my stat for Ronaldo is he's got more goals in games. So it's a hard one to call between those two. Maybe we'll have a look at that nightmare of a question in a future podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll come up at some point. I thought you were going to continue and talk about why Heskey and Messi have got your two favourite stats, but fair enough. I guess you picked Ronaldo instead. Okay, so Ronaldo topped it. So he effectively, based on the stats, he added the most value to that team in that moment as a record transfer anyway. So so Ronaldo's come out first. Who came out second?
So this is the interesting one, and then this was the first time I thought, well, maybe my data is not all it says it was, because and then I thought about it, and it's the tough one. So second is Gareth Bale. Now, this is quite an interesting situation, just because it's good to talk about as far as when you're looking at statistics go, is when you're trying to work out things like this, you want to try and keep external factors as low as possible. So if there's something that's affecting the result that is explained by another value in the thing. So for example, Ronaldo and Bale were in the same team. So most of the metrics we've collected are very similar for the two players, because they were there for Bale was there for all four Champions League wins, including a ridiculous bicycle kick in one of the finals. He's been ever present at the same time. Obviously played a lot less games and scored a lot less goals in that time. He almost played half as many games and got a quarter of the goals as Ronaldo, but still comes second just based on what they won together. So the question is there an issue here in the fact that there's a co-variable in the fact that they both played for a very good team that obviously was, and that they were both on. So the fact that Ronaldo was doing well, you'd expect Bale to do well based on that. So that is a good question of whether there's an issue with how we've collected it this way. But if you actually think about it, if I told you without saying anything else that they signed this player Gareth Bale and then this was his record for that team, it is the second best record on the list. Especially saying Kaká also played for some of that time. So Kaká was another record. They actually had 5 records in a row, Real Madrid. They bought Figo, then Zidane, then Kaká, then Ronaldo, then Bale. They were all record transfers in their own respect. But Kaká and Ronaldo actually bought the same summer. So Kaká was a world record fee, and then Ronaldo went the same summer. But Kaká comes 18th on the list because they just didn't win anything when he was there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that because they were playing the same team, they're going to have the same success. So yeah, that's so Bale's second. So I think it is interesting in the fact there's clearly some overlap in the fact that they were playing for the same team. But I think if you look at it, it's still pretty fair, I think. So I wasn't as worried as when I first pulled the data.
That's really interesting though, because given that, all of everything that's kind of surrounded Bale over the past 2 years in particular, where he's effectively been driven out of Real Madrid, statistically, it has given more value to Real Madrid than the likes of Zidane and all these other players. I mean, and the fact that he provided more value to the club than the likes of Maradona, Ruud Gullit, Fat Ronaldo, Alan Shearer, Zidane as well. Again, they're all on that list as record transfers, but they didn't provide as much value as Bale did. But now he's on loan at Tottenham. Yeah,
it's been a bit of a weird career for him, especially. I think it's part injury and then part you falling out with your manager. So there was clearly something going on. I think he was quite happy to say, well, if you're going to pay me over £500,000 a week, I'm just going to wait out. But yeah, it was a weird situation and how kind of vilified he was. It's kind of a bit like that, I think, in the Madrid with Barcelona Madrid with their press as well. Like, so the second something goes wrong, you're in big trouble. But yeah, interesting that he comes second. And this was a good question as well that we spoke about a bit when we were collecting this was, if you were talking about what, so you've had this player's been a record transfer. So Zidane's been a record transfer. At the time, I think, what was he, £47 million, something around there. But yeah, on the field, they had some success, but not compared to some of the other players on this. But then the fact they bought him then meant that he went on to become manager, and then he was also responsible for the Bale Champions Leagues and the Ronaldo Champions League. So yeah, obviously you can't look at that as, it's hard to look at that as a metric because obviously most of these other players didn't then become a manager of their own team. But surely that would bump him up and he's got to be a Real Madrid legend for winning 4 Champions League on the bounce as well,
absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, what they won 3 on the bounce, didn't they?
3 on the bounce, yeah.
4 in 5 years though, which is pretty incredible in its own right. Well, I guess that, I can see that being a future episode of maybe who provided more value to Real Madrid, Bale or Zidane, and you can kind of include the managerial statistics alongside it. But yeah,
different positions as well, I think, and the fact that Zidane is more a build-up player, and you'd expect Bale and Ronaldo to be banging. So Zidane didn't get that many goals. I think he got 37 goals in 155 games, which is not bad for attacking midfielder. So that's why one of the things of goals isn't always a good metric. But then again, Ruud Hullit's third on our list, and he didn't score much for Milan. He just brought them a lot of success. So that was good to see. I was a bit worried that we'd kind of made goals a bit too prevalent as far as affecting the end result. But clearly there are players on that finished really high that didn't score goals.
Right. So, okay, and Ruud Gullit rounded out the top 3. So, what did he do in his time? Was it at AC Milan?
This is at AC, yeah. So he went from AC to AC Milan from PSV Eindhoven for £6 million, which doesn't sound a lot today, but we're saying according to inflation, it's about £70 million in today's money. Just success really. He won 3 league titles there. We quite heavily weighted Champions League wins because they've always been kind of the pinnacle, obviously, of European football. So yeah, he won 2 Champions Leagues. So yeah, that was it basically. I think if you had a really good, the way our index seems to have worked out, if your team won a lot of trophies, then it will balance you out, even if you weren't an attacking player. Because yeah, that was something I was always worried about: is can you compare a centre midfielder to a striker? It's always an interesting thing, but obviously the way we built it, I hope it's kind of leveled out. Well, the fact that he's come third shows it, and it's all to do with the success they had there in a good Milan side at the time.
Right. Okay, interesting. And okay, so we've covered the top 3. So who made the bottom 3?
Okay, so it was interesting. Some interesting ones. I'm going to start with third bottom because I think we'll both be the most interested by this. And well, it has a good question as well. Can you really look at it if they're still playing? So there's 2 players that still play for that team on this list. One is Neymar, who still plays obviously for PSG. He was a record transfer for like £8 billion, whatever it was. And we've got Paul Pogba. So Paul Pogba comes third bottom. Yeah, so that's mainly because his average league position was higher than I thought it'd be, 4.25. So on average, when he's been in the team, they've come 4th. He's not played many games. He's not scored many goals. He's not. I think they won. What did they win? They won the Europa League, didn't they?
Yeah, they won the Europa League. I think that might be everything they've won.
But yeah, £89 million. And another weird situation, it's probably a good time to link in as well, that he's not the only player on the list where they've ended up buying him back for a record transfer. So who was my other player? That's a good question now. Oh yeah, it's Paolo Rossi. So Paolo Rossi was at Juventus. They basically did the weird Italian thing that I guess some fans won't be aware of, where you can have co-ownership. So they sold a part of the player, and then when you want to then decide who, once he's done playing for that team, when you decide who's going to play for next, you have to kind of bid for him. So they moved him to Vicenza. He did really well, and they ended up having to buy him back for a record fee. So Paul Pogba's not the only not the only player on the list that they've had to buy him back for silly money, but Paolo Rossi, I think, comes out quite high on our. Yeah, he was the 8th best transfer, so he did pretty well when he went back there. Whereas Paul Pogba, he's not done so.
Right. Okay. And Paolo Rossi. So he was back in the mid-70s by the looks of it. So, and then, I'm sure all of our readers or listeners, I should say, are aware that Pogba started out at Manchester United, but couldn't really break through into the team. So went to Juventus for, I'm guessing, peanuts at least anyway, in comparison to how much he ended up returning for, which was it 89 million or something? Or?
Yeah, crazy money.
Wow. Okay.
I thought it was a no-brainer at the time because he was on fire with that Juventus team at that point. But it has, I think attitude, him not being happy with the kind of level the team's at, injuries, it's kind of not quite worked out for him.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at the next player. So who came second last? That is another player I'd never really heard about. But there is a bit of a theme with these players as well. In the 60s, 70s, there seems to be a bit of a pattern of Italian teams setting record fees for players, normally based on the fact that they did really well the year before. So this guy's called Angelo Sormani. So he moved to from Mantova to Roma for £250,000. He had one game. So he had 1 year. He had one game. He stayed there for 1 year. He played 25 games. He scored 6 goals. So struggled basically. But again, it's a weird situation. The fact that he went there, didn't do very well. Moved to Sampdoria, did all right, and then he moved to Milan and became a Hall of Famer at Milan. He's a club legend there, and he's scored all sorts. So there's a few on this list that. In fact, that's the pattern really, and it leads into the person that came last as well. So Harold Nielsen, a Danish guy, played for Bologna. He was top goal scorer in Italy, so same pattern. Absolutely smashed it for that team. So Inter Milan have gone, right, we'll spend our big silly money on you. He played 8 games, he scored 2 goals. Complete flop there. Got thrown out, and then he was injured for the rest of his career. So he went from the top scorer in Italy to kind of disappeared. And he quite comfortably comes last. He didn't play any games. He barely scored any goals. They didn't win anything while he was there. So another. And to be honest, that kind of is quite prevalent all the way into the 90s, because you're even talking about like Christian Vieri, who I think is one of my first. I think other than Chiro is one of the first ones I remember of like, oh, he's just gone for like silly money, because £32 million back then was ridiculous. But there seems to be a lot of Italian teams that like spending money on silly players for silly money that did well the year before.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting as well, because if you look at some of these, most of the people on the list are legendary footballers. Whether they were legendary at that team they went for to, they, at least across their whole career, they are. But then, there are some of these people who, like you mentioned, the ones who kind of rounded out the bottom 3 that I had never heard of before, and their careers don't seem to have done that much in that moment. Actually, to be fair, did you say, was it Sormani? Did you say he became a club legend for one of the teams?
Yeah, he went to he ended up at Milan and became a bit of a club legend.
Oh, okay.
There's plenty of players that became club legends on this, but there's a lot that just disappeared. And I was actually surprised that there was players on this list, especially saying we only went back to 1960. I thought, well, I'm going to know. To be fair, I think there's about 4 players I've never heard of on the list, and then some absolute legends as well.
Yeah. Okay. And one thing I thought was really interesting when I had a look at the data with you at the end was that there are two players on the list who have made the record twice. In other words, they were record transfers twice across their career. Who were they?
Also, the interesting comparison with them is I think actually now Kaka, but Ona Crespo as well. But by that time, they were the only non-Europeans on the list as well. If you count the fact that Solmani, although he was Brazilian, actually played for Italy. So yeah, you were talking about probably two of the players I hadn't really heard of. So Diego Maradona and Ronaldo Nazario, or Fat Ronaldo as he's known most. Are we going to get in trouble for that? How much do you think we're going to get in trouble?
Well, for calling him Fat Ronaldo?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of true.
Maybe fatter Ronaldo.
Okay, big Ronaldo. Big, fat, round Ronaldo.
It's endearment, though. I think he's one of potentially my favourite player on the list, given the fact that it can never be Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It comes from a good place. I mean, we both would have grew up watching World Cup 98, 2002 in particular, those two, I imagine, and just kind of seeing Ronaldo just tearing up defences.
Let's go. So let's look at Maradona first. So it's probably a good time to bring in the fact that so we were looking at how successful they were for the team as one of the metrics. So obviously with your titles, leagues, or indexing them all and then combining that all to come up with some ranking. But one of the things that I floated at the start was to also throw in whether they've won personal awards. And the only one I could see that was kind of prevalent through it, as you would expect, is the Ballon d'Or. So obviously Ballon d'Or for world's best player. But what I did not know when collecting this, because when I got to Maradona, I was like, well, he hasn't even got in a top three. Like, what's happened? And it turns out until 1995 or 96, something like that, you couldn't win it if you weren't European.
Right,
which seems weird. There seems to have been a lot of that sort of stuff where the only people that seemed to get signed were Europeans. It was quite European. The European leagues obviously were quite our players only for quite a while, I think, from what you see from this list. So that was the weird thing is, although I'm sure Diego Maradona would have won it if he could have, he wasn't on that list, so we had to kind of drop that as an idea. He's got two records, 3 million and 5 million, 2 years after each other. So he went from Boca Juniors to Barcelona, and then 2 years later he went from Barcelona to Napoli. Didn't do much at Barcelona. He came 23rd on the list. That's one of the worst signings according to this. But then he is 9th when you look at when he went to Napoli. So he was there for 7 years. Is a complete club icon, legend. And you're talking in that time, because this is where he would have won a Ballon d'Or, I'm sure. So 1984, that was when the people remember the handed ball, but he also just walked around every England player, and then just nick one over, round a goal one in. So I think at that time there can't have been anyone better than him. And another player that I thought was overhyped, and then have watched more. The more I see of him, the more I'm like, I don't really understand how he was that good at football. But I still think Messi's better.
That's fair. Okay, so Maradona had 2 stints on there. His first stint, he performed pretty low on the index, at least, but then the second time round, he did a lot better. And what about Fat Ronaldo?
So Ronaldo, unlike Maradona, it wasn't in a row because Shearer was bought for record money in between. But yeah, so he went 1996. He went from Eindhoven to Barcelona. Watched a really good documentary about Bobby Robson, where it's really funny because they do a bit where they're talking about Bobby Robson kind of had a bit of a punt and spent a world record fee on this not very well known Brazilian called Ronaldo. And it's really funny with hindsight, just because he was a new manager. They were a bit skeptical about the buy. Really good documentary, by the way. It's really interesting. It's good for kind of understanding how Mourinho got into club management under Bobby Robson. He was Bobby Robson's translator, and then he kind of started helping with coaching, and then they basically became really close. And then really good documentary. So so he went to Barcelona, didn't really do much he was only there for a year. They came second. I think they won one European title, if I remember. I think
Yeah,
they
I
won
think
like
so.
the Super Cup.
I think it might have been like the Cup Winners' Cup or something. That
Yeah.
I can't even remember how that cup disappeared and what it
It was shit.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, because the UEFA Cup was still there, wasn't it? Like they had the UEFA Cup, but they just had this Cup Winners' Cup. I guess it just got absorbed into the UEFA Cup, and now there's a billion teams in it.
One other cup I was quite surprised by that was mentioned a lot when I was looking at kind of the player bios for a lot of these players. It's the Anglo-Italian Cup. So that a lot of our younger viewers, listeners wouldn't necessarily have heard of that cup. So it was a really weird England event against Italy summer trophy they used to do. But at some point it clearly was quite high up as far as esteem goes for trophies. But now obviously it doesn't even exist. There's all sorts of stuff people have won, like Intertoto and that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of that Anglo-Italian Cup. But I guess I mean, I don't know for definite, but I guess you can kind of see some origins given that a lot of, quite a few Italian teams were set up by English people back in the day. So maybe it's kind of was a byproduct of that.
Even if you look at British players, not a lot of them do end up going abroad, but Italy was where a lot of the kind of Russias, the Gascoignes, if you did kind of leave to go abroad, it was normally Italy as well. So there was clearly a bit of a connection there. So he didn't do great, Ronaldo at Barca. He got a cup, came second, doesn't sound like a bad year, but then was quickly bought for nearly double the money. He spent £19.5 million going to Inter. He's not really done very well. In fact, he's 19th and 21st according to this. So it made me another one that makes me question a little bit the validity of the fact that he did pretty well there, apart from he was injured for like the last 2-3 years of it. Well, actually, maybe that sounds like he wasn't great for them. But he was getting 30 goals a season when he was fit. So what more can you ask of a striker? It probably been penalised in not playing for the best of the Inter sides at that point. It wasn't a bad Inter side, but it was also when Inter had a good side. It was less runaway than it was now, where it's just Juve that wins it every year. There was kind of a bit of a power struggle between Juve, Inter, AC Milan during from the 60s onwards, really, and it with the odd sprout of like a Rome or someone. So figures wise didn't do great, but obviously at that point when he went to Inter, that was like the 98 World Cup. So I guess he probably there's a few players on this that did better internationally. In fact, the other quite the person I expected to come bottom of the list that didn't was Denilson from Sao Paulo to Real Betis, because he went for 21 mil at the time and they got relegated the year after. So I was really expecting him to come last. But a guy that played, I think he played 70 games. He played a lot of games for Brazil anyway, for someone that is kind of considered to be a bit of a dud signing. So, and I guess Ronaldo's international form was obviously better than it was for Barca and Inter. Injuries, I think injuries have a bit of a say in why Inter didn't do so great while he was there as well.
Yeah, I remember Denilson vaguely from a Championship Manager back in the day, like probably some of the first times I started playing it in the kind of mid to late 90s, and just I can't remember whether he was at Betis at that point or he was at the team before, but I remember him just being filthy on the game. But but
he was a good player. I mean, he had a great touch. Would skin people, but I guess it's weird buying someone. It's a bit like buying a world left back. It doesn't always necessarily mean that your team's going to get better. And you'll see most of these players on this list are strikers. I guess they always kind of go for more money.
Sure. Okay, cool. So Ronaldo is first. So he had the highest index and therefore provided the most worth at that point in time for his team. Second was Gareth Bale, surprisingly to some extent, or unsurprisingly for the reasons that you've kind of mentioned as well. And then third was Ruud Gullit. Interesting.
Yeah, which was good to see that it wasn't just attacking players that did well. It was actually quite interesting just to go through some of these players. So I think my favourite of the ones to read through, which I didn't necessarily know much about, was a guy called Pietro Anastasi that went to Juventus from Varese. And he was really successful, and another player that was bought because he'd done well. So I think he banged 3 against Juventus, and they were like, right, we'll buy him then. And yeah, he was. It was an interesting story in the fact that Italy has a bit of a south-north divide, and he was a massive icon for kind of immigrants from the south that were going into the north because yeah, he was from the south. And it seems a bit like it's almost a bit like a Gaza playing for a posh team or something, I guess. Like he's a bit of a salt of the earth guy that's come and done really well. So yeah, a massive icon apparently at Juventus, but I'd never really read too much of him. And he was called Petruzzo Turku in Sicilian, which means Peter Turk, which is an interesting nickname. There was a lot of Italian players that got called the White Pele. Like there's about 20 of them. It's like, yeah, nicknamed the White Pele. It's like, yeah, that's like, so was the last record transfer fee. Yeah.
I guess there weren't that many footballing icons back in the day. So if you were white and a striker, you're the White Pele.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess that's the thing. But yeah, so Pele's not on the list. To be very clear, Pele's not on the list.
Okay, so that I guess that answers the question of who was the most successful record transfer of the past 60 years. Interesting stuff. So, was there anything else you wanted to add to that, or shall we move on?
Do you want to talk about some of the kind of issues with it, or it's up to you?
No, well, I mean, to be fair, I think you did cover some along the way. But if there were any kind of interesting things that you noticed or observed that made it difficult to analyze, then by all means, kind of inform our listeners about that.
So I will probably leave it with so whenever you pull this, because it's so difficult in the fact that if positions and stuff, it makes kind of trying to make something that fits everything difficult. So I was expecting this list to be worse than it is, I think, and the fact that I'm quite happy with the ordering. The only person that came quite high on the list that I'd never heard of and didn't do anything was this guy called Gianluigi Lentini. So the guy went from Torino to Milan for 13 mil. Because I was really surprised to read it was in 1992, because I thought I'd know who he was if he was a world record transfer fee in 1992. But yeah, unfortunately, I think what happened with him was he was in a car crash a year into his career at Milan. So actually, as far as titles won, he won 3 league titles, so that puts him joint top of the list. No one else has won more than 3 league titles for their team. Fifth, he's won a Champions League, won 3 domestic cups, but he didn't play hardly in any of those games. So I think the thing I would fix if I did this again would be potentially saying that it's very time consuming, especially the way I've kind of collected this data and the fact it's quite a manual job. If I did it again, I'd probably put some sort of, if you didn't play enough games, you're not on the list. Similar for a guy called Papan, also that played for Milan, as well. He didn't play a lot of games, and yeah, that was another quite interesting thing, is they spent £10 million on him, which was a record. But at that time in Italy, you were only allowed to play 3 foreign players. So at that time, they had Frank Rijkaard, they had Ruud Gullit, And who's the other Dutch player they had? Someone that's quite good. Oh, it's going to kill me.
You said Hullet, Rijkaard, and Van Basten.
Yeah, there you go. Even probably the best player of the three. So, yeah, he signed for them at that point, and then just couldn't get you. They couldn't put him in the squad because you had to drop one of those absolute Dutch legends. So, yeah, so the guy that third on the list basically helped keep out Papan, who stayed at Milan a few years, but never really, but was quite successful, but didn't really play a lot. Again, he was 11th on the list, and you could, or was he 11th on the list? Yeah, he was 11th on the list. So you could argue that they're both quite. There's a bit of an issue with them both being in the list. But as I say, if you then, what you quite often do when I do this, or when anyone does this sort of data analysis, is when you run it and then see outliers, you can kind of work back and go, well, what's affecting my control group that's meant this has happened. You've got to be careful with that though, because you can end up kind of trying to prove a theory rather than, you know what I mean, if you set a hypothesis and then you keep changing everything until it works, you've not necessarily done the right thing in that situation.
Sure.
You've just tried to fit your own hypothesis. So yeah, if I had to do it again, I'd probably kind of weight it based on how much they actually played, because yeah, as I say, me or you could have signed for Real Madrid for £80 million and we'd be third on this list and we'd never played. So yeah, so there's probably other ways of doing it. And I think if we were to do this list in 4 years' time, so if we did the last 60 years in 40 years' time, it'd be way easier in the fact that there's probably more data. We could probably look at some of the things that I think are more interesting that we can look at
Interesting.
further down the line of kind of expected goals, assists, that kind of thing.
Sure. Okay, interesting. Well, I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's given that we're starting out, there'll be things that will become more apparent when we're analysing, and it will just get better as we go on.
Definitely. It was, but yeah, it was fun. It was a fun first project. It probably took way too long. I'm hoping. I think we'll speak about this in future podcasts, but I think our plan now is to try and work out more efficient ways of getting our data.
Yeah, for sure.
But it depends what you're looking at. If you're going to look at things over 60 years, it's going to be harder. I think if we look at who was the best assists last year, that's going to be a very different way you would collect that data. So yeah, interesting first one to do. And you could plug any players into this, which is quite cool. So if you kind of wanted to say, if like Thiago going to Liverpool 20 million, like, because it's not actually looking at the fee, you could plug his numbers in and say, you know, where would he fall on a list. So yeah, it was a good first thing to look at.
Cool. Okay. So, and let's move on to our final segment, which is probably my favorite, which is commentator of the week. So who have we gone for this week, Adam?
Oh, I've forgotten his name.
I don't know his name either.
It'd have been wicked if I knew that. But yeah, this is, yeah, we've gone. I do think we should try and go with more current stuff. As in, every time we hear some funny commentary, we'll bang it as our funny commentator of the week. But this is just an all-time classic, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, this is. I only know this as crazy Dutch commentator. Commentating on the World Cup '98 quarterfinal, Netherlands against Argentina. I think the score might be 1-1 at this point in time as well, and we're going into like the 90th minute. So this is crazy Dutch commentator.
Can't hear it.
Oh wait, that's a good thing you said that. That's probably because my headphones are in. That makes a lot of sense. Let's play that back. Wait, can you still hear me? Okay.
Who? Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay, let's play that again.
Nederland gaat in de halve finale komen. Ik heb opeens zo'n gevoel dat we in de halve finale gaan komen met het balbezit voor Frank de Boer. Frank de Boer speelt de bal heel goed naar Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp neemt de bal aan. Dennis Bergkamp. Frank de Boer gaat de bal aan Dennis Bergkamp. De bal Feyenoord en hij schiet de bal erin. We spelen nog ongeveer 20 seconden. Dennis Bergkamp 2-1.
Interestingly, this video also appears to have an American commentator commentating on the same goal. So I'm curious to see how it sounds in comparison.
Bergkamp running onto the ball. Bergkamp the touchdown.
Amateur hour from the American there. That's all-time gold. And the best thing about that is not only is it the funniest commentary you've ever heard, it's also an incredible goal. It's one of the all-time best touches. For me, a legend that got spelt the ball by Frank. Was it Frank de Boer or Ronald de Boer?
Frank de Boer.
Frank de Boer.
Yeah, spelled the ball.
It's all-time classic.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our first episode. Anything you want to add? Anything else?
I don't want to add anything else. I don't think we could have said any more. I think as far as first episodes go, it's probably the best one.
It's all downhill from here.
It can't be, but yeah, I think it's good. It's good to chat about football, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see who else is signed by the end of the transfer window, because then I might change one of my three. In fact, that's a good shout. If there's one, because we've done this before, transfer fee, I think we can transfer one player out if you think someone else is signed.
Okay,
that is good.
We have like a wild card, I guess, don't we? All right, cool.
Yes, good chat. Good chat.
Well, yeah, I hope you all found that interesting. Feel free to leave a comment for anyone who actually decides to watch this or listen to it. If you've got any ideas for things that you'd like us to analyze in future episodes, then please do let us know. But I've been Sunil, and
I've also been Sunil and Adam.
And thanks for listening.
Spanner in the works, isn't it?
See
See you later.